I challenged you to jump as high as you possibly could, and you could do it off a concrete floor or on a sandy beach, which would you choose? You sure? It should be a concrete floor. And the reason basically just boils down to stability. The more stable the surface, the more force you can put through it. And the exact same thing holds true for the human body and for the joints. So if you've not got a stable joint, you can forget about putting significant force through it. Your body's just not going to allow you. So for someone with unstable shoulders and they're trying to improve their bench press, it might not be a case of getting them stronger, it might be a case of getting them more stable before their lifts can improve. Now there's two ways that your body can create stability. One is through muscular tension, which is what we want, and the other is impingement. And this basically just means hard tissues like bone grinding against each other or bashing into each other. So an example of this in terms of posture is if we suck in our belly buttons, lift up your sternum and stand up nice and tall, you probably feel tension in your core, you might feel a bit of tension in your glutes, but if you completely relax and flop into this sort of posture, you probably feel the impingement. You can feel your spine just kind of going floppy and hanging out on those hard structures, literally on your soft tissue, your tendons, your ligaments. Now the problem with this is obviously that over time they're going to bash into each other, they're going to start wearing away. If you've ever had a hip impingement or a shoulder impingement, you're going to be aware that that eventually results in pain. If you've had sciatica, that's because of an impingement type scenario where bony structures are crushing together and your sciatic nerve, which runs through the middle, is getting compressed. So if you can create a better relationship with tension around that structure, you can decompress the joint, you can allow things to move normally, you can improve your symptoms of pain or sciatica, for example, but also you're going to create a more stable joint for you to produce optimum force through. This concept of stability through tension is essential for the body, it's essential for proper posture, and it's essential for movement. Now the image that you've just seen is a model of what we call tensegrity. Now this concept basically describes the way that the body is given its structure. So it's incorrect to think that the skeleton provides the scaffolding and then the muscles are just pulleys that pull the bones. Instead, the muscles provide the structure and they suspend the skeleton within their web of tension. So in the previous image, you saw a piece of metal suspended, seemingly defying gravity, but it's held up. Well, it's not held up, but it's suspended, like I said, through the tensioned interaction with all the other pieces. With that, again, comes the second part of this concept of tensegrity, which is that if you pull one part of the model, if you move one aspect of it, all the other parts have to compensate. Again, this is how the body works. If you move one little bit of the body, every other bit up and down the chain has to respond. Now in the following section, I'm going to go over two positions. You could call them exercises if you like, but they're two positions that demonstrate the difference between tensioned movement and what I call empty movement. Empty movement is basically just floppy range of motion. It might be what you call flexibility. It's the position that you can get your joints into. The tensioned movement, however, is what I would like to refer to as mobility, because that's the range of motion of which you have control. Now, someone who moves with tension compared with someone who doesn't, that might be the difference between a high-level performer and an average performer while doing the same movement. It might be the difference between two people doing the same movement, one gets injured and one doesn't. So you can use these exercises not just as a training tool, but as a test for yourself. One, to understand this concept of how tension affects movement, but also to see how willing your body is to induce tension upon itself, or whether it's a little bit prone to going into empty, floppy ranges of motion without a proper muscular control. So the setup is like this. You're going to kneel on the ground, you can have your knees and feet hip width apart, hands hip width apart as well, and we're going to have everything stacked, so knees underneath hips, hands underneath your shoulders. Okay, so we're going to be in neutral spine as well, so no arching of the back, no rounding of the spine. So we're going to be in a neutral posture, belly button sucked in, and we're going to just push the ground away very slightly as well. Now from here, turn to the front. You're going to take one hand, you're going to put it on the opposite shoulder, and still pushing the ground away, you're going to open up that shoulder as far as you can without any movement of the lower body. So the feet and the knees are not going to shift. We're just going to rotate as far as we can. I like to keep looking down at the ground while we do this. I'm not trying to open up too much using the neck, trying to reduce tension in that area and just see how far you can rotate. Some of you are going to find just that position on its own extremely challenging and like full of tension. Now, if you're in that category, that's great. If you're not in that category, you might be someone who finds that completely, almost pointlessly easy. And if that's the case, what I want you to do first of all is just to really exaggerate all the cues. Push the ground away, suck in that belly button, really push for the furthest amount of rotation you can possibly achieve. Hopefully then you'll feel a little bit of tension. If not, we've got the more advanced version for you, which is extremely challenging, and I guarantee that all of you will feel tension when we do this. It's the exact same position, exact same intention, but you're just going to lift your knees an inch or so off the ground. As we go through it, you're going to try and keep your knees at the same distance from the ground, so you're trying not to let them move, shift side to side or up and down. And particularly the knee on the side that you are rotating, you're trying not to let that knee lift up far off the ground. If the knee comes with us, it means the pelvis is coming as well, and that means that we're not getting the rotation of the rib cage independent from the pelvis. So, as we go through, set up like so, knees just hovering off the ground, hand up, and I'm going to rotate, and I'm focusing on keeping my right knee as close to the ground as I can. Incredibly challenging. And then back down. It's not one that you need to do for very long, as you can see, to find a significant stimulus in that exercise. The reason the second one is so important is, like I said, it's going to teach you the difference in the way that the position feels just with a little bit more tension. And it's going to really highlight the difference, like I said, between mobility and flexibility. So if you're creating empty tension in your movement and you're just a bit floppy, you might rotate really, really far, but not feel any tension, and therefore you don't have any muscular control over those positions. If you've got control of your positions, you might find in that second exercise that you can't rotate as far, but that's the actual range that you have control over. So this is the difference between just passive stretching and going through an active dynamic tension stretch, which if you follow my content, you'll know is something that I greatly prefer. So have a go at that yourself, see how willing your body is to initiate tension, and let me know how you get on.